Okay, I debated on several different titles, and I finally settled on knocking down strongholds. The scripture is coming from Joshua chapter 6, verses 1 through 25. Now Jericho was strictly shut up because of the children of Israel. None went out, and none came in. And the Lord said unto Joshua, See, I have given into thine hand Jericho, and the king thereof, and the mighty men of valor. And ye shall compass the city, and all ye men of war, and go around the city once. Thus thou shalt do 6 days. And 7 priests shall bear before the ark 7 trumpets of ram's horns. And the 7th day ye shall compass the city 7 times, and the priests shall blow the trumpets. And it shall come to pass that when they make a long blast of the ram's horns, and when ye hear the sound of the trumpet, all the people shall shout with a great shout, and the wall of the city shall fall down flat. And the people shall ascend up every man straight before him. And Joshua the son of Nun called the priests, and said unto them, Take up the ark of the covenant, and let 7 priests bear 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark of the Lord. And he said unto the people, Pass on, and compass the city, and let him that is armed pass on before the ark of the Lord. And it came to pass, when Joshua had spoken unto the people, that the 7 priests bearing the 7 trumpets of ram's horns, and the armed men went before the priests that blew with the trumpets, and their reward came after the ark. The priests going on and blowing with the trumpets. And Joshua had commanded the people, saying, Ye shall not shout, nor make any noise with your voice, neither shall any word proceed out of your mouth until the day I bid you shout. Then ye shall shout. So the ark of the Lord compassed the city, going about it once. And they came into the camp and lodged in the camp. Joshua rose early in the morning, and the priests took up the ark of the Lord. And the 7 priests bearing 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark of the Lord went on continually, and blew with the trumpets. And the armed men went before them, but the reward came after the ark of the Lord, the priests going on and blowing with the trumpets. And the 2nd day they compassed the city once, and returned into the camp. So they did 6 days. And it came to pass on the 7th day that they rose early about the dawning of the day, and compassed the city after the same manner 7 times. Only on that day they compassed the city 7 times. And it came to pass at the 7th time, when the priests blew with the trumpets, Joshua said unto the people, Shout, for the Lord has given you the city. And the city shall be accursed, even it and all that are therein, to the Lord. Only Rahab the harlot shall live, and she and all that are with her in the house, because she hid the messengers that we sent. And ye in any wise keep yourselves from the accursed thing, lest ye make yourself accursed when ye take of the accursed thing, and make the camp of Israel curse and trouble it. But all the silver and gold and vessels of brass and iron are concentrated unto the Lord. They shall come into the treasury of the Lord. So the people shouted when the priests blew the trumpets, and it came to pass when the people heard the sound of the trumpet, and the people shouted with a great shout, that the wall fell down flat, so that the people went up into the city, every man straight before him, and they took the city. And they utterly destroyed all that was in the city, both man and woman, young and old, and ox and sheep and ass, with the edge of the sword. But Joshua had said unto the two men that had spied out the country, Go into the harlot's house, and bring out thence the woman and all that she hath, as ye swear unto her. And the young men that were spies went in, and brought out Rahab, and her father, and her mother, her brethren, and all that she had, and they brought out all her kindred, and left them without the camp of Israel. And they burnt the city with fire, and all that was therein, only the silver and the gold, and the vessels of brass and of iron, they put into the treasury of the house of the Lord. And Joshua saved Rahab the harlot alive, and her father's household, and all that she had, and she dwelleth in Israel, even unto this day, because she hid the messengers which Joshua sent to spy out Jericho. Now, I never noticed before when I was reading this, but there was an order to the events of the things. Things happen in a certain order. Now, God always has a plan. We know that. We always have a plan and a purpose for how things should be done. The people then, as we do today, were searching probably scratching their heads, wondering, what the heck is happening here? You know, we see things happen, we cry out to God and wonder, when we're in trouble and nothing seems to happen, nothing ever changes, and we're scratching our head thinking, Lord, what's going on here? Why is nothing happening? But the thing of it was, something was happening. Okay? I mean, God's plan isn't always visible. Okay? But it's always there. Now, but the thing of it is, even when we don't understand, we have to follow God's plan to get the victory. We've seen that in the scripture. Now, when we follow his plan, when we do it his way, we will have the victory and he will get the glory. Because when we do it his way, people will see that it couldn't have happened any other way but through and by God. Here's a quote I read here a while back, and it's kind of stuck in my head. God doesn't always reveal the purpose of his way, but his ways are never without purpose. Okay, if you want to see the results of what happens when we don't follow God's plans, read Joshua chapter 7. It gives you a real good idea of how far south things can go when we don't follow God's plan. Now, so what was the order of the things that happened? Like I say, I never really paid any attention until I was working on this lesson. I noticed 13 things that happened. That, a certain sequence of things. Number one was they marched around the wall one time daily for 6 days, 7 times on day 7. There was no talking, no shouting, no human voices. The priests were to blow the trumpets every time they made a lap. Okay. Now, there were guards at the head of the procession. Then there were 7 priests with trumpets. Then the Ark of the Covenant. Then guards at the rear. Okay. Now, It wasn't until the seventh day that the people were supposed to shout. And on that shout, and at the sound of the trumpets, the wall went boom. Down they went. Then, number 10, the men were able to take the city. Number 11, they kept only what God said to keep, with the exception of Achan. Like I say, you can read about that in chapter 7. The rest was to be burned by fire. Number 13, Rahab and her family were saved alive because of her act of faith in helping the spies. Okay, now there were some facts that I thought was rather interesting that I'd like to share with you. There were four of them. There were, from what I read, 600,000 fighting men in the camp. Okay, now, though there were 600,000 fighting men, not all were involved in marching around the walls. There was, according to what I read, there were 40,000 men marching around the wall, which would have been a representative. There would have been enough in the fighting men to represent each tribe of Israel. Ancient Jericho was approximately 1.5 miles in circumference. Some places say it was 0.5 mile in circumference, but anyway, it would have taken about 30 to 60 minutes to walk around the walls one time. Now, 7 times around would have taken anywhere between 7 and 10 hours. And the question that kept going through my mind was, with all those feet, with 40,000 armed guards, that's 80,000 feet. What was happening in the ground? Was there some sort of vibration? What was going on? So, here's what I find out. When 40,000 men, that's 80,000 feet, march in unison, this causes a significant amount of kinetic energy. Okay? And that can be felt through the ground as seismic waves. That can be felt as a subtle or distinct shaking in the immediate vicinity. The vibration would be strongest near the army and would dissipate or get milder the further away it got from the army. So when something shakes, when it vibrates, there's a movement going on here. There's a shift. There's a change happening. Okay? So, okay, let's look at something slightly different here. I've often wondered, what were they thinking? What were those Israelis thinking? They were marching around the wall one time a day. No words, nothing. They just march around the wall one time, and they go back to the camp. Now, I found out that the camp was approximately 6 miles north of the Dead Sea. So they had that mile and a half to walk around the camp, plus 6 miles back to camp. So, anyway, I thought, nothing seemed to change. Everything looked the same. They were probably wondering, what the heck is the point? That's what I would have thought. It just seemed like nothing was going on, and they were probably wondering, why am I even bothering? Okay? But what we have to understand is that God often works behind the scenes. He works in ways that we can't often see or feel or hear. That's why we can't rely on our emotions. We have emotions. We have to walk by faith. But, you see, God was working. He was moving. Their job was not to understand why, necessarily, but to faithfully do what God called them to do, even though they didn't understand. Something new was about to happen, but before the new could happen, the old had to be displaced. Let's look at it this way. When you're going to plant a garden, what do? You have to till up the soil. The soil has to be shifted and moved. You have to weed out the things that are not good for the garden. Okay, let's see. So you have to get out the weeds and the rocks and all this bad stuff. Thing that's going to hinder the growth of the seed you plant. Now, so then you have to add to the soil fertilizer, things that will help your plants to grow and be healthy. Okay? And that's the same way with us in our hearts. We have to allow God to plow up that hard heart, make it soft, take out the things that don't belong there, so that He can come back in again and replace it with the things that will help us to grow healthy and strong faith. Okay, now, also when we plant the seeds, okay, now, the way we did our garden when we was living on the farm, Daddy would go in and plow up with the soil, with the plow on the back of the tractor, and we would go through with a hoe and make rows. Again, the soil is being shifted. It's being moved, rearranged. We would go in and plant the seed at a certain pace apart, and then we would go back and cover the soil. This, again, was a shifting, a rearranging. And then those seeds were in the dark. They didn't see what was going on around them, even if they could see things. But it was in that darkness, under the right conditions, that they were able to put down roots in a soil that would help them to grow and be healthy. Okay. And after so many days, they would shoot upwards. There would be a sprout come upwards. The ground was displaced upwards and downwards. Something new happened because the seed was following its nature and doing what it was supposed to do. It was growing. And that's the same way we are. When we allow God to work in us and to place there the right conditions, we can put down strong, healthy, faithful roots so that we can grow and produce what He has planned for us to produce. Okay? We can be, when we work in unity with other believers, we can grow, we can be focused, and we can be powerful. But we have to do it together under the right conditions. The conditions of faith that He plants in our hearts. So, what I was wondering, let's go here first. Let's continue the thing with gardening. Now, when we're going to go, like I mentioned already, when we go to plant a garden, we have to prepare the soil. Okay? We have to prepare and clear the soil. The ground has to be cleared of anything, as I said, that prevents the growth of the plants. We must remove from the ground that is our heart sinful habits and healthy lifestyles so that Jesus can become the center of our lives. We must also plant seeds of faith. Now, to plant the right seeds, we must plant the right seeds to receive an expected harvest. if we plant seeds of doubt, we're going to harvest plants of doubt. We'll harvest that fruit. But if we plant faithfulness, love, mercy, grace, those are the things that we will harvest. Okay? We must also, when we plant those seeds in the ground, we trust God for the results. Okay? And so when we let God work on our heart, we must trust Him for the results, even when it doesn't make any sense, when we don't understand. Now, planting a garden also requires patience with the progress. Gardens take time, patience, and consistent care. There is a waiting period between when we plant and when we harvest. Okay. Now, be patient and be faithful to what God calls you to, and the right results will come in God's time. Okay. Now, we must also nourish and tend to that garden. Weeding is important. We must keep out the weeds of all those nasty weeds that like to grow faster than the plants do. We must constantly work to keep them at bay so that we can have healthy, productive plants. And so we must constantly also nourish those plants. Give them the right amount of water, and hopefully God will provide the right amount of sunshine that they need. So must we also continue to nourish our hearts and our spiritual lives. Attending church, read the Bible, pray, do all the things that God would have us to do. And so that we will have the victory over the things that Satan tries to bring in our lives. Now, there's also harvest and faithfulness. To overcome Satan's tactics and gain a harvest of souls for Jesus, we must rely on His strength for the battle. And there will be battles. We know that already. Okay. So, and again, weeding. We must weeds will choke out the healthy plants. Those weeds that Satan tries to plant in our heart, they're going to choke the life out of us. We must do what is necessary, regardless of how painful it might be, to get rid of those weeds so that we can grow healthy and strong for Jesus. Now, this could be really a short one, but I also there's several lessons that we can learn from this. And I'd like to tell you about a few of them. We must be obedient to God's instructions. See, the Israelis followed God's instructions. They didn't understand. They didn't see results at first, but they followed His instructions, exactly what He said to do when He said to do it. We're not going to always understand his instructions. Are going to sound crazy. They're not going to make sense a lot of times. But nevertheless, there's a plan there somewhere. And we have to just do our jobs and be faithful and trust that the results will come when they're supposed to. There must also be faith in action. Faith is active. Faith isn't faith until you use it. And it'll never grow if it just sits there, okay? It requires us to step out of our comfort zone, even when there is no immediate results. Okay? Now, like I said, faith is active. It has to be used to grow. Think about this, a rubber band, okay? Rubber bands stretch when they're used. They also never return their original size, okay? Once they're used, once they're stretched, and that's the way faith is. Our faith, the more often that it is used, the bigger it will grow. Now, granted, a rubber band will only stretch so far before it snaps. Unlike our faith, the more it chews, the more it grows, the more we rely on God, and the more we know that He is faithful and true to His word. Okay. There also must be unity in faith. Great things can be done for God, for God's kingdom, when we work together. Read Acts chapter 2. Look at how they grew and the things that were accomplished when the church worked together in unity. Okay? Now, silence as a discipline. Now, silence can be a hard thing to do. Somebody just can't stand. Some people, me among them, has a hard time with being quiet. Okay? But silence is a good thing. It allows us to hear God more clearly so that He can prepare us for the right time to act. Okay? Now, speaking of timing, God's timing is perfect. The victory will come. We will know great results when we wait for God and His timing. Okay. Now, another lesson that can be learned here. Follow God even when it doesn't make sense. Now, those Israelites were probably, I don't know what they were thinking, but I'm thinking, for me, I'm thinking, this don't make sense. There's no logic to this. But they went ahead and followed His commands, even against impossible odds. Their faith and hope were in Him to be true and faithful to His words. But God is purposeful, not random. Okay. Now, He had a specific plan in place for this time and this place so that everyone would know that He was the one who did this thing. Okay, because from what I've read, the way those walls were made, those vibrations, those seismic waves, weren't strong enough to make those walls fall. But hey, we all know that we serve a God of impossibilities. Man said, no, it can't be done. God says, you watch. Okay? Now, another lesson here is we are not sufficient in and of ourselves. We need God. When we do things our way, well, you don't need me to tell you it's going to go south. It's not going to end pretty. Okay? But the only way that we are going to win this or any other battle is to keep God front and center in our lives. Let Him show us what we need to say and what we need to do so that people will know and understand that this was God, not us. Okay, now, another thing. Obedience to God matters. Okay, now, if the Israelis had not followed God's instructions to the letter, done everything in the sequences He lined out, they would have not received the promise. This was their first battle in conquering the promised land. Okay. This would help them to know and to understand that the only way to receive their inheritance was to do it God's way. Okay. Now, what God promises, He will fulfill. God doesn't lie. He can't lie. It's not in His personal dictionary. Okay? Unlike humans, now, we make promises and for whatever reasons, we forget, we get distracted, or maybe even we never intended to keep the promise. I don't know. But sometimes we make promises and they're not kept. Okay? But God doesn't work that way. what he says he will do, he will do that. We often have to wait for it. We often have to prove faithful to him, but he will always do what he says he will do. Okay, now, what, anyway, let's, in conclusion to all this, I've read that, in my studying for this, I read that the walls fell outward, okay, consistent with an external force. Now, the Bible says they fell straight down, okay, but from what I've read, they fell outward. So, they fell outward, consistent with an external force, rather than being pushed over from the outside. Okay? Or they didn't fall inward during a conventional siege. From a purely physics standpoint, this should have never happened. A marching band, a marching army, could not generate enough force to collapse those walls. Now understand, those walls were at least 13 feet high and 6 feet wide. Okay? So it had to come from more than human effort. It took a divine effort to make those walls fall. Okay? Now, 4 more things. What we should never forget is that our God can make impossible things possible. Okay? Number 2, it is by faith that our walls will fall. Okay? The only way to knock down those strongholds is to say, God, here I am. I don't know how to fix this. I don't know what to do. It just needs to be done. Fix it. And he will fix it, okay? Victory comes not by might, not by anything we can do, but by his power. See, we've got the banner up here. Not by might, nor by power, but it's by God's word, okay? Now, and lastly, walls fail not by strategy, but by steps of faith. Sometimes those faith can seem a little bit small, but take the step anyway. It doesn't make sense, but take that step of faith anyway. Follow God, and the victory will happen. Okay? I'm done.